In this video, we will tap into the movie Twilight 2008. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie's production details and box office performance. Finally, we will provide the reviews and personal reactions. Let's begin with the movie story. The movie starts out in a forest watching a deer at a pool of water. Something is hunting the deer, but we are not shown what. Suddenly, it realizes there is something there and takes off. A few seconds later, a dark, shady figure takes the deer down. Meanwhile, in Phoenix, Bella, played by Kristen Stewart, is shown on top of a hill, putting a small cactus for her to take with her. Her voiceover explains that she is moving away from her eccentric mother and stepfather to allow them alone time while he travels with his minor league baseball team. Her mom tells her that she doesn't have to go to Fox, but Bella says it is okay and she wants to. Bella's voiceover continues as we drive across a bridge into Fox, a small town with a population of little over 3,000 in it. She introduces her dad, Charlie, and the setting the place in the US that gets the most rain and cloud average than any other city, and a place she only spent 2 weeks each summer. They pull up to Charlie's place and upload her things for the police cruiser. Charlie is the police chief, and he takes her stuff up to her room saying he's cleared off a shelf in the bathroom for her. Oh yeah, one bathroom, she says. The room has all of her old stuff and art supplies in it. He explained that he just had someone pick out new bedding for her. You like purple, right? Yeah, purple's nice. They stand awkwardly for a moment before he excuses himself, and Bella's voiceover says that one of the good things about Charlie is that he doesn't hover. The next scene introduced Billy Black and his son Jacob as they drop off a truck for Bella. Charlie brought it from them and Jacob rebuilt the engine, so he shows her the ropes on it, telling her the little tricks she'll have to remember to shift, etc. She asks if he needs a ride to school. He says no, he goes to school on the reservation. He is a Quail Indian. She nods and then heads off to school, where she is starting her first day in the middle of March. She tries to go in unnoticed, but Eric Sharkey catches up to her and introduces himself. He jokes with her that he can show her the ropes, which launch dates, etc., and she politely declines, saying she prefers to suffer in silence. He kids that he is going to do a special article on her in the school newspaper, and she sort of freaks at that and tells him not to do. In gym class, she sucks at playing volleyball and totally nails a kid named Mike Newton in the back of the head. She goes up and apologizes, and he uses the moment to flirt with her. She is obviously not interested, but another girl who chalks up, Jessica, definitely wants Mike to be interested in her, so she flirts a little bit and is fake nice to Bella. During lunch, another girl, Angela, snaps a picture of Bella saying it is for the article in the school paper, but Eric says there won't be one. Mike flirts a bit more and another kid comes up and steals Mike's chair. Jessica uses the opportunity to scarf up closer to Bella, blocking Mike from sitting closer to Bella again. Enter the Collins. Through the window, the cafeteria, the Collins are seen walking into the room. Bella asks who they are and Jessica dishes on them. The Collins are Dr. Collins' foster kids. The blonde is Russelly, the short-haired guy is Emmett, and it is weird and creepy that they are together because they all live in the same house, even if they are not really related. The next car is Alice, and She is really weird and she is with Jasper. Jessica calls Dr. Cullen a matchmaker and Angela says she wishes Dr. Cullen would adopt her. In comes Edward. Robert, Peterson and Jessica tells Bella to not even bother because he doesn't date because obviously none of the girls here are good enough for him. Bella says that was not even her intention and looks at Edward. He looks short of energy as he looks back at her, so she looks away. Off to biology class, and Bella walks in, sees Edward staring at her, and walks right in front of a fan that blows her smile his way. He looks absolutely sick, like he is trying not to poop as he smells her, but the only empty seat is next to him, so she takes it, and he shoves one of the tapeworm in her direction. He has black eyes when she sits down. She sifts her hair trying to figure out what is wrong. Right before the bell rings, Edward bolts. Bella goes to the school office for something but ends up leaving after she overhears Edward trying to get out of the class. He bolts from that room too. Later, she and Charlie go to a dinner for dinner. Everyone there tries to help her remember them, but she really cannot, and she obviously uncomfortable with all the attention. One guy comes up and says he was a Santa Claus one year, and Charlie reminds him that she was 4 when that happened. Now we cut to some shot of energy plant or warehouse. A man is running downstairs and away from something or someone. However, he gets stopped by his pursuers and is attacked. Bella comes down the front steps and slips on ice. Charlie, who has just pulled up in her truck, helps her up. He explained that he just bought new tires since they are getting belt and it was getting icy out. She thanks him and he tells her he is off to go look into an attack at a local plant. He says it was some sort of animal. She heads off to school and the voiceover informs us she has every intention of going and asking Edward what his problem was. Thing is, when the Collins pull up in a reconvertible and a white Jeep, Edward is not with them. Over the next few days, he is still a no-show. Finally, he is in biology one day. He actually starts talking to her, introducing himself as they start looking at slides through a microscope. First team to correctly identify all 4 slides gets the golden onion. They talk about the weather, how she is not fond of it, why she moved to Forks, etc. He walks her to her locker, still asking questions while she holds the golden onion. When she asks if he got contacts because his eyes were really dark last time she saw him, he stuffed through and answered it's the fluorescent lights, then takes off. Outside, she is getting her stuff together to get in her truck. She looks over her shoulder and sees that Edward is staring at her. Suddenly, Taylor's big blue van hit eyes when swerving around a car backing out of its spot. He loses control and is hesitant of Bella, but out of nowhere comes Edward, who grabs Bella and puts up his hand, which leaves a huge dent in the van and stops it. Edward and Bella locks eyes and he knows he's obviously done something really stupid. He takes off as the other students rush the van and Taylor rolls down his window and apologizes profusely. At the hospital, Bella is trying to calm down Taylor as Charlie walks in and tells Taylor he'll deal with him later. Basically tells him he is going to suspend his license. Dr. Cullen comes in, examines Bella and asks what happened. She says she was really lucky because Edward was right there, rescued her. Taylor starts apologizing again and Charlie checks a divider curtain shut. Dr. Cullen releases Bella and Charlie advises her to call her mom. As Bella heads off around a corner, she notices Edward, Dr. Cullen and Rossley talking. Rossley is saying that what Edward did risked the whole family. Dr. Cullen notices Bella and stops the conversation, and Bella asks to talk to Edward. He tries to convince her that she hit her head and that he was standing next to her the whole time. She insists that he was across the parking lot and wants to know what happened. He tells her to get used to disappointment because he is not saying anything. That night, she wakes up in the middle of the night. Edward is in her room. She turns on the light and he is gone. That is the first night she dreamed about Edward. The next day, Bella gets to school and everyone is crowding around for a field trip. Mike tries to ask Bella to the prom, but she is not paying attention at first, watching Edward. She finally tells him to ask Jessica because she will be in Jacksonville that weekend. She is making it up though. On the tip, Edward asks her what is a Jacksonville and dodges her question and tells her they shouldn't be friends. Jessica interrupts, telling Bella about going to prom with Mike. Outside again, Bella finally spits out that she thinks Edward regrets saving her. When Alice asks if she will be joining them on their bus, Edward says it's full. Back at school, Eric invites Bella to push the beach down on the reservation with the gang. Angela, Taylor, Mike and Jessica. She says she will go, then drops an apple. Edward does a neat trick. He had been halfway across the room for one by catching the apple with his foot and sending it up to his hands. Look for the iconic book cover to Twilight in this moment, she says. Your mood swings are giving me whiplash. He explained that they really shouldn't be friends. She asks if he will answer her questions. He says no, but he'd be like to hear her theories. She says radioactive spiders are kryptonite. He says those are all superheroes, but what if I am the bad guy? She says he is not. She trusts him. He says don't. She asks if they can just hang out and invites him along to the beach that weekend. He asks which beach and she tells him and he backs out. At La Push, the guys and Jessica are getting ready to surf when three of the locals show up: Jacob, a friend, and Sam. They ask if they can hang out and Jessica tells them to keep Bella company since her date bailed on her. Jacob, a little miffed, asks who that was. Jessica says it was Edward, and Sam makes the comment that the Collins cannot come to La Push. Later, Bella asks Jessica what Sam meant by that. Jacob says that it is a really scary story and tells her that according to legends the tribe is descended from wolves and the Jacob's grandfather came across the Collins hunting. They were told that the Collins are different and they set up a treaty. There is a great montage of wolves, the Indians, and the Collins in clothes from the 1930s here. The Collins would never come on their land. Bella asks what they are. Jacob says it is just a story. At home, Bella starts looking up cult legends and comes across a book that is sold in a bookstore that is in a town close by called Port Angels. The next school day is bright and sunny, and Jessica tells Bella, who is obviously looking around for someone, that the Collins never show on sunny days. They always go hiking and camping. Angela runs up excited because she asked Eric to prom and he said yes. Bella encouraged her in doing that. At La Push, they decided to head into Port Angeles to find dresses. Some guys walk by the shop they go to and whistle and catcall at them. The girls brush it off. Bella is not interested in the dresses, but she tells the girls that all the dresses they try on are good. Jessica points this out and Bella says she wants to get to this bookstore and that she will meet the girls at dinner. She takes off and buys her cult legend book. On her way back in town, it is dark now. She sees two of the guys who walk by the shop. She turns around and takes another road, but she ends up surrounded by all four. They start pushing her around when suddenly a silver Volvo ships around the corner. Edward gets out and tells Bella to get in, then growls like Riley growls at the guys. They back off and flee in terror. He gets in the car and speed off, telling Bella to distract them so he doesn't go back and kill those brewers. They get to the restaurant and Jessica and Angela have already eaten. Edward wants to make sure Bella eats too. Through their conversation in the restaurant, Edward revealed that he can read thoughts, which is how he found Bella. He goes round the room, naming the thoughts that everyone is thinking: money, cat, etc., but he cannot read Bella's thought. In the car ride home, Bella accidentally touches Edward's hand as she tries to adjust the temperature. His hands are cold, she says. He doesn't say anything. They pull up to the police station in Fox, where Bella sees her dad's cruiser and Edward sees his father's car. Dr. Collins comes out having examined the body of another person who had been attacked by an animal. He makes serious eye contact with Edward. Bella asks if it is the same animal that attacked the man at the station. Yes, serious eye contact again. She goes in and comforts her dad because it was a friend of his who was killed. Remember Santa Man? He gives her some pepper spray just to help her young man feel at ease. Back at home, she starts looking up various legends about gold ones and finds legends on vampire from all different cultures. The montage ends with the image of Edward leaning in for the kill herself. At school the next day, she locks eyes with him, then deliberately walks past him and into the forest. She tells him she knows what he is. This is shown in the trailer, that he is impossibly fast, cold, pale, etc. He tells her to say it, vampire, she says, but she is not scared. He sort of wigs out and takes her further up the mountain, running super fast, and shows her what he does in the sunlight. He sparks, that there is no prey that can escape him and he is very strong. He rips up a free limb and smashes it against a boulder. He calls Bella his own drug, his own brand of heroin that he could kill at any time. She insists that he won't. The next few minutes is tied up in a montage of the two of them together in a meadow and just generally getting to know one another. He tells her that he and his family is vegetarian, so they don't eat humans. Alice sees the future, but other than that, he is the only other one with an emotional gift. He shows up at her house one night having snuck through her window, and he tells her he wants to try something. He instructs her to remain very still, then leans in for the kiss. She gets a little carried away and pulls him on top of her, but he freaks out and throws himself backward. He cannot lose control and she apologizes for losing control herself. Edward tells Bella he wants to introduce her to his family and she is afraid they will not like her. Complication arises when Edward hears Billy coming and he takes off as Billy pulls up, but not before they see each other. Billy, while taking to Charlie about the attacks, tells Bella that he will not want anyone to get hurt, implying the Collins are dangerous. The next day, Edward walks Bella into the huge, practically all glass house where the family is preparing an Italian dinner for Bella, even though none of them eat human foods. She explains she is already eaten and doesn't want to inconvenience them, and Rosalie flips out, breaking a glass bowl and starts ripping into Edward about how this is going to turn out bad for the family. Bella realizes she means that if she is the next meal, and Alice introduces herself by giving Bella a hug and telling that she does smell good. Good to eat, that is. Edward is obviously impressed and heads Bella off upstairs while Esme, Dr. Collins' wife, says that went well. In Edward's room, there's no bed but a bunch of music. He tries to help Bella dance, but she doesn't dance. I'll have to make you, he says, to which she replies, I'm not scared of you. Again, trailer moment, Edward whisk her off to the trees where they get a really good view of the mountains and lay of the land. Somewhere in here is a scene where Charlie is with some other people and dogs as they track the animals vampire that are responsible for the attack. They find the footprints of the woman who is involved headed east, but that is all. Charlie and Bella ends up at the dinner again and are asked if there has been any progresses on the attack cases. There has not, but they are working hard. Charlie then starts asking Bella about boys. Mike and the other boys are outside the dinner goofing off. Bella says she is not interested in any of them. One morning, Bella comes to Charlie, who is cleaning his shotgun, and tells him that she is short of dating Edward and that he wants to meet her dad. He is in the driveway, so Charlie snaps the gun shut and decided to just get things over with. Edward introduces himself to Chief Son and tells him that Bella is going to play baseball with his family. Charlie chuckles a bit at that Bella is no good at sports but says okay. On her way out, Charlie asks Bella if she still has that pepper spray. At the game, a thunderstorm rolls in and Alice says it is time to start. Bella plays as umpire and Crystal, Rosalie and Jasper all take turns at bat. Esme catches, Edward and Emmett are outfielders and Alice pitches. This is the coolest scene too. All is going well until Alice sees the three vampires who has been attacking lately coming into the clearly. She gathers everyone up and Edward apologizes to Bella for putting her in danger. At first things seems to be going well and they are about to resume the game with the newcomers Laurent, James and Victoria. When James catches a whiff of Bella, you brought a snake. Edward freaks out and they all stand at the ready to attack. Charlie suggests they all leave and the three go, but Edward knows that James is a skill tracker and he is not going to give up. He wants to get Bella out of town immediately. She talks him into taking her back to the house where she can stage a fight and leave so that Charlie will be safe. Bella ends up saying the exact same thing to her dad that her mom said when she was leaving him so that she can leave without Charlie trying to follow. It works. James is going to leave Charlie alone. Edward and Bella get back to the house where Laurent is warning the Collins that James will never give up and to not underestimate Victoria. The Collins formulate a plan after Laurent leaves and Alice, Jasper and Bella all head off to Phoenix. Emmett, Edward and Rosalie run into the forest with some of Bella's clothes to create a fake trail. Alice, Jasper and Bella makes it to Phoenix and are waiting. Alice sees that James leaves the fake scent and is headed toward a place with a lot of mirrors. Bella recognizes the place that Alice draws as an old ballet studio she wants to and gets a call from Edward who is on his way to Phoenix. He wants to leave with Bella for a while until James gives up. Victoria is still around and Esme and Rosalie are protecting Charlie's place. Bella gets a call from home which turns out to be her mom who sounds frantic. James then takes over and tells Bella to go to the ballet studio and her mom will not be hurt. She sneaks out from Alice and Jasper and ends up at the studio where he hears her mom's frantic voice. She opens a closet and sees a TV with her as a little girl and her mom's. James turns up and explains that he borrowed the tape and a camcorder and he starts recording as he tortures Bella by throwing her across the room and breaking her leg. He tells her to tell Edward to avenge her, but she says no. Edward flies in and a crispy fight ensues. James ends up getting back to Bella and biting her wrist. Edward finally pins James and rips chunk from his neck as Alice, Jasper, Emmett, and Christie arrive. They take care of James, lighting a fire and tearing him to bits. Alice is pretty good at breaking necks. And Charlie and Edward start working on Bella. She is screaming and writhing in pain from the bite, and Charlie tells Edward he needs to draw the venom out of her. He does, but it doesn't look like he will be able to stop for a minute. Charlie tells him to find the strength and Bella black out. Bella wakes up in the hospital to her mom, who explains that she fell down a flight of stairs and through a window. Bella, of course, knows what really happened but doesn't say anything. Her mom leaves, and Edward, who has not left the room once, wakes up and apologizes and says that Bella should go to Jacksonville with her mom. Bella panics and tells him not to leave her. He promised not to. Back in Fox, Edward and Charlie are waiting uncomfortably for Bella to come down the stairs. She comes down fully decked out in a gorgeous prom dress, and Edward and Bella head off to prom. Jacob is waiting for Bella outside, and he comes with a warning from his dad. Billy has paid Jacob to tell Bella to break up with Edward and that we will be watching you. Jacob laughs it off, and Bella tells him to make sure he gets paid. Edward and Bella head into the prom but go outside after a couple minutes. Edward helps Bella dance on his feet, and she finally says that she wants to become a vampire, that she is choosing a life with him. He asks why a long life with him would not be good enough and tells her that he doesn't want to end her life. She says it's good enough for now. Panning out, we see a woman watching the two dance from an upstairs window. When she turns around, we recognize Victoria. She shakes her hair down and smiles heavily before walking away from the window. Twilight, the movie released in 2008, tops the US box office charts. Move aside Harry Potter, stand down James Bond, because there's a new kid in town and this one has plenty of bite. The teen vampire flick Twilight made a killing at the US box office at the weekend with a blood-sucking $70.6 million opening haul. Catherine Hardwicke films an adaptation of Stephenie Meyer's novel about a young woman who falls in love with a hunky vampire in a remote Washington state town. Janet, one of the top 30 opening in the North America history, an especially impressive feat considering its meager $35 million, $23.3 million budget. Exit polls suggested an overwhelming 75% of the audience were female. The film was also the biggest ever opener for a movie directed by a woman. Twilight's success left the weekend's only other opener, the Disney animated teen Bolt in the Doghouse, despite the presence of Miley Cyrus and John Travolta in the voice cast. The story of a canon star of a fictional TV show who believes his powers are real took only $27 million from below the expected $40 million. Twilight did even better than had been expected, perhaps due to repeat viewing by young fans of Meyer books. A sequel has already been greenlit, and there could eventually be 4 films based on the novels. The impressive opening was also helped by the fact that the film had little in the way of competition. The new Harry Potter film, The Half-Blood Prince, had originally been intended to open his weekend but has been held back until next summer instead. Elsewhere, latest James Bond outing Quantum of Solace held up well despite the 2 new entries. It looked second stop with $27.4 million in its second week. This represents a 60% drop compared to last weekend, where its predecessor Casino Royale was only 25% down in its second week. The top 5 was rounded out by the animated adventure Madagascar 2: Escape to Africa, which took 16 million in its third week, and the comedy role models, which banked $7.2 million in its third week. Twilight's unbelievable box office run was a painful loss for Paramount Pictures. Welcome to Tales from the Box Office, and I think Twilight could be huge. Those were the words that were once said to be uttered by Paramount's former co-president of production, Karen Ronsfeldt, who helped turn the YA novel into a movie. While the movie ultimately would not be made at Paramount, it turns out she was more right than anyone could have possibly predicted. In the end, Paramount loss would turn into Summit Entertainment's ridiculous gain as the movie based on Stephenie Meyer's best-selling book would kick off not just a billion-dollar franchise but an entire blockbuster YA craze. It's easy to take for granted now, but the saga of Bella and Edward, which is now ingrained in popular culture, did not reek of success at the outset. Mayers was not an author by trade and had essentially no experience before writing Twilight. Movies based on YA fantasy sci-fi were not regular canon for Hollywood franchises at that time, and having a woman at the helm of a blockbuster franchise was, sad to say, nearly unheard of against the perceived art. The books and the film generated untold millions of all involved. Paramount may have missed out on a once-in-a-lifetime gold mine while Summit made a name for itself on the back of its vampire love story. And this week's Tales from the Box Office, in honor of the 15th anniversary of Twilight, we are looking back at the movie, how Summit Entertainment scored the hit of a lifetime, how Paramount Pictures let the same hit slip through its fingers, what happened after the movie became a hit, and what lessons we can learn from it all these years later. Let's dig in, shall we? The story of Twilight all starts with a dream, cliches as that sounds. The story originally came to Stephenie Meyer in a dream, and she immediately set about turning that dream into a novel. She wrote the whole thing in 3 months. I don't think I'm a writer. I think I'm a storyteller, Meyer said to Time in April 2008. The words are not always perfect. Indeed, the writing itself may have been criticized by critics, but it hardly mattered. The story resonated with its intended young adult audience when it was published in 2005. The story centers on a teenager named Bella Swan who moves to a small town in the Pacific Northwest where she quickly falls in love with a mysterious boy named Edward Cullen. The catch, he turns out to be a 108 years old vampire. It was on the New York Times best-seller list within a month of release. Naturally, Hollywood would soon come calling. Originally, it was Greg Moradian who brought the manuscripts to David Gale, and then head of Paramount's MTV Films. Rosenfeld convinced Paramount to acquire the rights, and Mark Lord was hired to write the screenplay, one that differed greatly from the version that eventually made it to screen. The project languished in development hell at Paramount for several years before the right lapsed in April 2007. That's when Summit Entertainment pounced, with the company's then president Eric Fake seeing the potential. He wasted no time in getting things moving in the right direction. Catherine Hardwicke, Lord of Downtown 13, was set to direct the film adaptation of Meyer's book in late 2007, but it was not easy to get her to sign on. After being handed 5 scripts from Summit, including none of Twilight, the director was not having it. I did not respond to any of them, she said to Vanity Fair in 2018. I just throw him all in the trash. That changed once she read Meyer's book. staying faithful to the source material. At the time, it was rare for a woman to be handed the reins to a big movie, and Hollywood at large seems to have little faith in the project. An executive once told Hardwicke that her film might be interesting at most to about 400 cars in Salt Lake City. The same Vanity Fair piece explained they kept saying that to short the cost down, but it was a perfect storm at the time. The director said as proof of just how little respect female filmmakers received at the time. Hardwick was removed from the franchise and did not return to direct the sequels, but that's another story entirely. Melissa Rosenberg was hired to open a new version of the screenplay. Harvick wanted to rework, and the idea was to stay more faithful to what Meyers put on the page. Rosenberg, speaking premiere in October 2008, had this to say about it. I was confident because my take was and that it was a great book and that we should stick to the book as our Bible. And I think that's what they were hoping for because there was actually an earlier version at Paramount that they threw out. I remember Stephenie saying it was a great script, it just had nothing to do with the book, and with a project like this, you cannot really veer away from the book. Indeed, Lord's script was a radical departure involving about many other things. Bella escaping the FBI on a jet ski, it was the opposite of a faithful adaptation. The earlier script that they had before was just pretty crazy. Bella was a track star in the first scene, Harvick said to Media Bell magazine in September 2008. I read it and was like, this is not the girl from the book that I love. So everybody wanted to make it as close to the book as possible. The book is long, so we cannot have every scene, but we did the sweetened, concentrated milk version. Who in the world could possibly live up to that? Despite Sommer's faith in the source material, the studio was still determined to make the movie on the cheap. They came to me and said, you have got to find a way to cut $4 million out of the budget in the next 4 days or we are pulling the plug. Harvick said in the same Vanity Fair piece, they said, great, glad you cut it, and then we made the movie. The budget all told was $37 million with our actually minimal marketing spent. Budget constraints aside, the hardest part was nailing the casting of Bella and Edward. If this movie went well, it would inevitably become a Harry Potter situation where these actors would be playing the role for some time, as Meyer had already written several follow-up novels. As you can imagine, where you can read Stephenie's description of Edward, you are like, who in the world could possibly live up to that? Hardwick said in the Media BLD interview after a rugged series of auditions, they landed on Robert Pattinson. He is become an A-lister now and is releasing gigantic hits like The Batman as well as acclaimed indies such as Good Time. He was very much an up-and-comer at that moment. His biggest claim to fame was Cedric Diggory in the Harry Potter films. Even though fans ultimately went nuts for Pattinson, it was not exactly a happy marriage on set. I was 21 and kind of wanted to make it as arty as possible, Pattinson said to GQ in 2022. We had this strong tension where the studio was a little bit scared to make things a little bit too emo and stuff, and I thought that was the only way to play it. At one point, the actor's team visited the set to let him know that he was on the verge of being fired. At lunch, they were like, okay, so whatever you are doing right now, after lunch just do the opposite or you will be fired by the end of the day. It's such an obvious choice. Much like Peterson, Kristen Stewart was a very promising up-and-comer at the time this movie was coming together. She had started in films like Panic Room but had yet to truly break out. She has since become one of the most respected actors working today, earning an Oscar nomination for her role in Spencer, but it's Twilight that pulled her on the A-list. It's also Stewart who helped to ensure that Pattinson would play Edward, speaking with Vanity Fair in November 2008. She explained, I basically cast him. We did one day of audition and a bunch of guys came in. Catherine Hardwicke, the director afterwards, was like, what do you think? This is such a hard choice. I was like, are you kidding me? It's such an obvious choice. It could not have been better. It was short of perfect. While much has been said of the movies in the years since their release, Stewart certainly did not look down on the material when talking on the role. I thought it was really ambitious, this portrayal of the ultimate, most epic love story that could be. The actresses said in that same interview the rest of the cast would be filled out with similarly promising newcomers as well as sturdy character actors including Annie Kendrick, Taylor Lautner, and Billy Park. It's also important to note that Summit at the time was independent and not shot owned by Lionsgate. The studio was trying to make bigger waves in Hollywood, and this project was viewed as a big step in that direction. Youth-oriented movies are definitely a major part of our business, Eric Frick said to THR in 2007. Valley Sutton said he robbed banks because they are where the money was, and you can say the same of these kinds of movies since young people are the ones when who do the movies every weekend. Little did Frick know that they were about to start a Y revolution. The financial journey. Twilight was released in theater just ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday on November 21, 2008. Box office tracking number of the film just kept going on and up in the weeks leading up to the release. Buzz was so strong that the studio essentially got a ton of free press from magazines like Entertaining Weekly, which devoted lots of ink to the budding sensation. It was the perfect storm for a surprise hit. The film debuted to a shockingly large $69.6 million, easily taking the top spot at the box office. It trounces Disney family-friendly plot and Quantum of Solace, Daniel Craig's second turn as James Bond, the sequel to the much-beloved Casino Royale, which was in its second weekend. Hardwicke's adaptation held strong over Thanksgiving, taking in $39.5 million over the 5-day holiday stretch. It was a smash hit that kept putting butts in seat well into the new year. All told, Twilight took in $192 million domestically to go with $214 million internationally for a grand total of $407 million, or nearly 11 times its times-down production budget. The money didn't stop there either. Twilight was also the top-selling DVD of the year, bringing in tens of millions more in revenue for the studio. Stewart and Pattinson reunited for a total of 4 sequels, taping the rest of Meyer's book, with the films bringing in a combined $3.3 billion globally. That's to say nothing for further DVD sales, cable rights, and merchandise, not to mention the 160 million copies of the books that have been sold to date. It becomes a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. Twilight, the movie released in 2008, and it was the first movie in the franchise. The movie is directed by Catherine Hardwicke, produced by Vic Goffrey, Craig Mordian, Mark Morgan, screenplay by Melissa Rosenberg, based on Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. The movie is released in 2008. Callan Lutz as Edward Cullen, physically the strongest vampire of the family. Stephenie Meyer's paranormal romance novel Twilight was originally optioned by Paramount Pictures on April 2004, but the screenplay that was subsequently developed was substantially different from its source material. When Summit Entertainment reinvented itself as a full-service studio in April 2007, it began development of a film adaptation anew, having picked up the right from Paramount, who coincidentally had made an unrelated film with the same title in 1998. In a turnaround, the company perceives the film as an opportunity to launch a franchise based on the success of Mayer's book and its sequel. Catherine Hardwicke was hired to direct the film and Melissa Rosenberg was hired to write the script in mid 2007. The filmmaker behind Twilight worked to create a film that was faithful to the novel as they thought possible when converting the story to another medium. Producer Greg Muradian said it's very important to distinguish that we are making a separate piece of art that obviously is going to remain very faithful to the book. But at the same time, we have a separate responsibility to make the best movie you can make. To ensure a faithful adaptation, Mayer was kept very involved in the production process, having been invited to visit the set during filming and even asked to give notes on the script and on a rough cast of the film. Kristen Stewart was on the set of Adventureland when Hardwicke visited her for the informal screen test that captivated the director. Hardwicke had trouble finding an actor authoritatively enough to play vampire Edward Cullen. Then she got a call about a guy in London. I looked at a couple pictures and was like, I'm not sure. Hardwicke says he had been fired from the last job. He was unemployed, he was in debt. Pattinson flew to Los Angeles on his own dime to read with Stewart. Shallow Fernandez, Jackson Rothbone, Ben Barnes, and Robert Pattinson were the final four up for the role of Edward. Mayer had imagined Henry Cavill in the role while she was writing the book, but he was deemed too old by the time production began. Hardwicke did not initially choose Robert Pattinson for the role of Edward Cullen, but after an audition at her home with Stewart, he was selected. Hardwicke said Kristen was like, it's got to be Rob. She felt connected to him from the first moment. On a bed in Catherine Hardwicke house is where Peterson kissed Stewart for the first time for the Twilight screen test. That bed made Peterson, who is in the right now. Don't say you will die for me unless you really mean it. If you are a vampire, it's all about you. Why is Edward Cullen obsessed to the point of erotomania by Bella Swan? Because she smells so yummy, but he doesn't want to kill her. Here's what he tells her: he must not be around her. He might sink his wagon just a little and not be able to stop. She finds this overwhelmingly attractive. She tells him he is the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. I don't remember Edward ever saying that to her. Maybe once. He keeps on saying they should stay far apart because he craves her so much. Should a wonderful fall in love with a man because he desires her so much? Men seems to think so. It's not about the women, it's about the man desire. We all know there is no such thing as a vampire. Come on now. That is Twilight really about. It's about a teenage boy trying to practice abstinence and how in the heat of the moment it's really hard, and about a girl who wants to go all the way with him and doesn't care what might happen. He is so beautiful, she would do anything for him. She is the embodiment of the sentiment, I die for you. She is like many adolescents, a Thanapol. If there were no vampire in Twilight, it would be a thin-blooded teenage romance about two good-looking kids who want each other so much because they want each other. Sometimes that's all it's about. Is not it? They are in love with being in love. In Twilight, however, they have a seductive disagreement about whether he should kill her. She is like, I don't especially want to die, but if that's what it takes, count me in. She is touched by his devotion. Think what a sacrifice he is making on her behalf. On prom night on the stage of the not especially private gazebo in the public gardens, he tatters right on the brink of a fang job and then brings all of her trembling to a dead stand still. The movie is lush and beautiful and the actors are well chosen. You may recall Robert Pattinson as Cedric Diggory who on Voldemort's orders was murdered in a graveyard in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Maybe he was already a vampire. Pattinson is not unaware of how handsome he is when Bella and Edward still stranger exchange stunts and burning looks in the school cafeteria. He transfixes her with a dark and glowering day penetrating stare. I checked Patterson out on Google Images and found he almost always glares at the camera neath shadowed brow. Kristen Stewart's Bella, on the other hand, is a fresh-faced innocence who is totally undefended against his voltaic. Bella has left her mom and stepdad in hot Arizona, catches a plotted cactus to come live in the clammy, rainy Pacific Northwest home for seasonal affective disorder. Her dad is the chief of police of the very small town of Fort Washington. He greatest asset he doesn't hover at high school. She quickly noticed the paternally pale Colin Klein, who is some short seems to be wearing as much Max Factory panicked white as Harry Longton. Edward is 114 years old. He must be really tired of taking biology class. Darwin came in during his watch and proved vampires cannot exist. There are other strange youth around, including American Indians who appears not to distantly descends from their tribe ancestors. Wolves, great tension between the wolves and vampires, also some rival vampires around. How small is this town? The Fox High School is so big it must serve a consolidated district serving the whole table setting. The main local normal kid is a nice sandy-haired boy who asks Baylor to the prom. He is out of his depth here unless he can transmogrify into a grizzly. Also, there are 4 grey bordered coats at the next table in the local diner, who eavesdrop and exchange significant glances and yet big significant close-up, but are still just sitting significantly nodding for all I know. Edward has the ability to move as swiftly as Superman. Like him, he can stop a runaway pickup with one arm. He rescued Bella twice that I remember, maybe because he truly loves her. Because he is saving her for later. She has questioned, how did you appear out of nowhere and stop that truck? Well, might be asked when he finally explained that he is a vampire. He goes up from 8 to 10 on her arithmeter. Why do guards always prefer the distant, aloof, handsome, dangerous dudes instead of cheerful chaps like me? Twilight will mesmerize its target audience, 16-year-old girls and their grandmothers. Their mothers know all too much about boys like this. I saw it at a sneak preview. Last time I saw a movie in the same theater, the audience welcomed it as an opportunity to catch up on a gossip, texting and laughing at private jokes. This time the audience was rapt with attention, sometimes a soft chuckle as when the principal Indian boy has well-developed incisors, sometimes a soft sigh. Afterwards I dropped on some conversations. A few were saying he is so hot, more floated in a sweet dreaminess. Edward seems to share their surrender instincts. The movie, based on the Stephenie Meyer novel, was directed by Catherine Hardwicke. She uses her great discovery Nikki Reed in the role of the beautiful Rosalie Hale Edward Hardwicke 13 2003 when she was only 14. That was a movie that knew a lot more about teenage girls. The girl played by Reed in the movie would make mincemeat of Edward, but I understand who Twilight appeals to and it sure will. Twilight 2008 and the movie is based on the same name of a novel. I cannot entirely fault director Catherine Hardwicke for this fires in her defense. This is the best installment in the series. Likewise, the muted color palette and neutral northwestern scenery provide some thoughtful and authentic mind and scene. Then again, there are so many scenes that are unintentionally hilarious. The vampire baseball game, Edward Cullen misquoting like he just shit himself in biology class. James looking directly in the camera not once, not twice, but thrice. That Hardwicke deserves just as much blame as Stephenie Meyer and Kristen Stewart and everyone over at Summit Entertainment. I realize that both Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson have somewhat beaten the bad actor allegation. See certain women at the lighthouse for evidence, but their performances in Twilight are cringeworthy to the extreme, specifically Stewart's suffering and stunting clash of emotions. The film is unbearable thanks to the acting, especially when we are subjected to it over the course of 2 hours. I have never read the Twilight book series, so I am not qualified to pick apart Mayer's story. Melissa Lausenberg's screenplay, however, is rife for ridicule. Twilight is filled with dialogue that belongs in the I am 14 and this is deep hall of fame. You are like my own personal brand of. Not to mention the abrupt tonal shift, the lack of character development, and the destructive messaging that legions of impressionable teenage girls might take the wrong way. Obsessive toxic relationships are perfectly fine as long as the undead is good. You just cannot say stuff like that to me ever, Bella Swan stammered after Edward's death. She is better off without him. Then, in the final scene, she tries to give it up to him on prom night on the dance floor, no less. Swan, thanks to a flat cliffhanger, their emotional, abusive, codependent relationship will be given free rein to blossom over the course of 4 more god-awful films. Twilight. Let's be honest, which of us is our impressionable teenage years has not displaced and irrational horror off into a freaky emo crush on a moody vampire with sky-high cheekbones and a taste for human blood? I mean, have not we all in a very real sense? Since her celebrated 2003 film 13, director Catherine Hardwicke has accumulated some expertise in the dark side of adolescence and put it to good use in his widely enjoyable new film, an adaptation of the best-selling young adult novel by Stephenie Meyer. Twilight is mad, bad, and deeply underwholesome to know, and perhaps in its serious way the most entertaining teen film since 10 Things I Hate About You. It is certainly a new twist on the time-honored nice guy bad boy storyline. Virginal love lies from the right side of the tracks have been conceiving the hearts of unsuitable guys since Olivia Newton-John in Grease, Jennifer Grey in Dirty Dancing, and Claire Danes in Stevie My So-Called Life. But this is something else, an obscure story of young love played absolutely straight and actually better and more convincingly act than many of the ponderous grown-up relationship movies we got to sit through. In sports with the high school gender and America's pro abstinence true love awaits moment, but it scars something that stare on its mate. Kristen Stewart plays Bella, a winningly pale girl who is the child of broken home. She has been living with her divorced mom in Phoenix, Arizona, but now purpose to live with dad, a police chief in a small northern town near a swampy landscape which vampire conscious will intensely notice in a little reminiscent of the Carpathian mountain of Tasmania. I am incidentally waiting for a postmodern vampire story to pay homage to Dracula's relationship with Yorkshire. Bella shows up for her first day at her new school and instantly establishes herself as a bit of a klutz but not outrageously so, and she is containedly enough for a babe to get plenty of expectable looking guys to want to make friends. But it is Bella Disney not too attracted to these nice, normal people, and near the movie climax, we see her looking pagantly from the window of a speeding car at these very same nice, normal people emerging from a dinner vertebral tableau of the nice, safe normality that could have been hers. For Bella is instantly attracted to a gaunt and charismatic hottie called Edward Cullen, played by the young British star Robert Pattinson. Edward is one of a super cool bunch of standoffish kids who seems to have dark hair, pale skin, and a very great aversion to sunshine. Edward spends a good deal of his time looking at Bella intensely up through his eyelashes as if in homage to Princess Diana. Pretty soon Edward is using what appear to be superpower to save Bella from various scrapes, and then he confesses his feelings for her and the truth about himself. Edward is undead, from a family of semi-nice vampires who live in the forest and who have vowed to be vegetarians, that is, live only on animal flesh. Edwin and Bella are in agonies, however much he wants to give in to his feelings for Bella in the bedroom department, and however much Bella wants him to, he cannot because he will become him carried away. The quaint nonsense of controversial pediatrics will not be sufficient. In the heat of the moment, Edward will need some old school neck munching and blood spelping, and he will therefore condemn Bella to an entirety in the vampire's Twilight, and he of course loves her too much for that. Edward shows up in Bella's bedroom and they try a little innocent making out before Edward has to wrench himself away, mastering himself with a much virile self-control as a 19th century curate. Edward is enough for a gentleman to take Bella to the prom, traditionally the venue at which America's young women decide to surrender their virginity to some profoundly unworthy suitor. They smooth a little on the dance floor, but then he inclines his teeth toward her every thought before whisper a question with infinite gentleness. Is she ready? Of course, all his pride is conservative America's Posacapant with just saying no, but is also is a strange and unexpected way. Respond to just moment when anything and everything is visualized in the media, when women and women's bodies are obviously presented in sexual terms, and what happens if you don't fit in. To many intelligent young people, the word of the sexually active may indeed seems like an unlovely vampiric cult. Is there any romance, any fervency, any recapture at all that has nothing to do with any of this commercially determined? Twilight offers its own uproariously wide and engaging answer. It is in its unworldly way sweetly idealistic with a charm all of its own, a teen romance to get your teeth into. Twilight 2008. Curiosity almost always gets the better of me when it comes to watching movies. Out of pure curiosity, I have ended up watching films like Wild Wild West, Buffy the Vampire Slave, and American Ninja, among so many others, and so Twilight, the 2008 movie adaptation of the book of the same name. It is the most recent movie I ended up watching just to see what it was all about. I have known about the Twilight films for years, not only where they huge box office success, but over time they got a reputation for being absolutely terrible. Twilight and its sequels are from roughly the same era as Baby by Justin Bieber, Hannah Montana, and Wii Sports. To me, this movie is like a relic from the past. The film was a huge deal for a while, but now in 2020, nobody seems to talk about it anymore. Meanwhile, other blockbusters from the time like The Dark Knight, Avatar, and Transformer are discussed a lot more, or at least it seems that way. Did a bad reputation ruin Twilight's longevity? I was curious to see what the movie had to offer, plus, it was a big name movie that I had never seen before. So I sat down and watched the original Twilight. Twilight follows 17 years old Bella Swan, Kristen Stewart, as she moves from Arizona to the small town of Fort Washington, where her cop dad Charlie lives. Soon after arriving at the local high school, she captures the attention of Edward Cullen, a member of the infamous Cullen family, usually avoided by nearly everyone. Why the Cullen family is so different is not clear to Bella at this time. Edward acts very strange around Bella, and when she is almost hit by a car, he appears out of nowhere and stops it from hitting her with just one hand. Bella demands answers, but Edward doesn't give in and instead warns her not to hang out with Jacob Black, a Native American guy their age who is a family friend to Bella and lives on the local Twilight Indian reservation. He tells her that the Cullen family and the Twilight Indians are mortal enemies. Bella does some research and finds out that Edward and the rest of the Cullen family are all vampire. She talks to him about it and he tells her the truth about being a vampire. Bella and Edward begin a romance and she is introduced to his family, some of whom welcome her, some of whom are concerned that she will tell everyone else their big secret. There are bigger fish to fry, however, because there are aggressive human killing vampires that have come to Fox and started murdering people. The two vampire groups have a big fight, and at the end of the movie, Bella and Edward go to prom together. The movie is probably one of the most strongly hated films of all time, so I feel like writing another bad reviews for it is the almost pointless, but I cannot give Twilight that much praise movie wise. Twilight is the movie equivalent of loudmouth breathing, super awkward, somewhat amusing, but ultimately just annoying. Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson have virtually zero chemistry together, and they both turned in completely dull and wooden performances. The rest of the cast doesn't do much better. In fact, very few of the characters come across as likable at all. The most likable character is Bella's dad, who just cannot figure out what's going on. Most aspects of this movie range from mediocre to just plain bad. The direction choices are kinda weird and the script is really terrible. There are so many moments of extraordinarily awkward silence in the movie. I'm not even sure why they were included. At its worst, Twilight borders on painful to watch. The color palette of the entire film is white grey and pale grey blue, making for sort of a drowsy experience overall. This is not necessarily a boring movie, but if you are not invested in the relationship between Bella and Edward, it's quite possible that it will become uninteresting to you quickly. You cannot go into the movie expecting cool vampire action either. All the action scenes are super watered down and unexciting. Plus, the CGI is laughable at times. This is probably supposed to be a movie intended for teens to watch, but I feel like the large majority of people my age will not be into this if it came out today. Even though it was a massive smash hit in 2008, realistically, this is a movie that should appeal to middle school girls. Typing that didn't make me feel great about watching it. So, I understand that the standard of its technical quality are less important than a compelling romance between the two main characters, but still, Twilight is not a good movie. The thing about this movie that actually interests me is not the content of the film itself, but rather the impact it had on culture and the influence it has had over the years. One could argue that the Harry Potter series started the YA film stand, but I think Twilight really set in into furious motion. Without Twilight, it's hard to tell if movies like The Hunger Games or Divergent would have been very successful, if made at all. We most likely have this movie and the series it created to thank of that type of film's popularity. However, it seems like production of that style of movie has rose down dramatically. The YA film trend was left in the late double zeros and early 2010 just like Twilight effectively was. These films also helped to make gigantic stars out of Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson at the height of its popularity and to a lesser extent Taylor Lautner as well. Although I suppose the latter installment in the series gave him more exposure. Kristen Stewart has been in a few notable movies since, although she is still primarily known for playing her Twilight character. The same can be said for Robert Pattinson, although he seems to be having a quiet career. This is Johnson's in more critically acclaimed, slightly under the radar film like Good Time and The Lighthouse, and is starring in the upcoming Christopher Nolan movie Tenet. Taylor Lautner has basically fallen off completely from mainstream movies. I think that because none of the main actors have gone on the have careers that lived on to the Twilight hype is probably one reasons why nobody really talk about the series anymore. Sure, Twilight has always been popular about compared to Harry Potter on the Hunger Games, it nearly forgotten for a movie with so much influence that left behind a legitimate legacy on Hollywood. It's interesting that this movie is barely talked about these days. Maybe it's because it just is not that great for a film anyway. Safety charts violence 3 out of 10. Vampire fight each other. Some off-screen violence, there is some blood as well, but not much. Twilight is not very well made or well executed, but it's probably not as terrible as I am making it sound. You'll like it if you enjoy YA style movies, and it has a solid soundtrack as well. Maybe Twilight has not crossed your mind in a while, and it is a far from a masterpiece, but it's possible that it deserves to be held in a slightly higher regards, especially considering how many people out here hate this film and everything it represents with a passion. What it does represent in a time forgotten and left behind by many. Generally, poor quality aside, this is at least a somehow entertaining movie. I am giving this a C as a grade. I can see why Twilight became such a big deal, but I can also see why it's been left in the past. Twilight reviewed. Twilight hit theater in the United States on 2008. Those good at the math can deduce then that the film is celebrating its 15th anniversary. In celebration a grandiose box set of 4K UHD disc. The sequels are making their debut on the format here, releasing as a Best Buy inclusive, perhaps one of the last of their kind. The first film and its physical media release is covered in depth here. In 2008, I was a 28 years old bachelor who had no reason in the world to be interested in the Twilight book and movies, which were aimed squarely at teen girls. Mind you, I bore then no ill will and always loved a book series that got young people reading. As those 15 years have passed, however, series star Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson have grown into some of the most reserved and widely accomplished actors of our time, and the thrilling rumors of just how gonzo these vampire or werewolves love stories become in the latter entries has intrigued me. The time has come for me, a roundly middle-aged husband and father who knows nothing about Twilight, to take a deep dive into the series and recount my adventures to you in written form. I am going to write about each film as I see it, knowing little about what will happen in each successive installment. I was not sure if I would get it, but I think I get it. This is teen girl angst unleashed upon an expansive fancy landscape, and that's totally okay. When Kristen Stewart's Bella Swan arrives in Forks, Washington to stay with her divorced dad for a while, she is the intimate center of attention of literally every character in Forks, Washington. It's like the town was just sitting in frozen stasis waiting for her to arrive. There's a fully formed group of friends, including Anna Kendrick, Jessica, that immediately accept her and talk about nothing but her. There's her sheriff father, his Tony friends at the dinner, and Gil Badminton and Taylor Luther as Billy and Jacob Black, who literally come bearing the gift of a classic truck restored by hand just for Bella. I too know about Twilight to know that there's going to some vampire vs werewolf angst coming down the pike. Even I could not escape the Team Edward vs Team Jacob Rose of the late August. And then there are the Collins, the pasty and gorgeous vampire clan essentially have a Bollywood-style mind-strapped introduction as they enter the high school for the first time, and Jessica narrates their entrance to Bella personally. Robert Pattinson, Edward Cullen is the last to appear, and I immediately get it. This guy is a Jamstein as vampire, aloof, cooler than cool, and the intimate knee obsession of our teen girl protagonist. The longing, the etching, dramatic, substance desire of Bella Swan. It's the raw nerve at the center of the story and at the center of the entirety of Forks. I am aware that author Stephenie Meyer created a phenomenon with her novels, and that the film series only elevated that freedom to a fever pitch. Meyer somehow over-dramatized accounting of teen angst, desire, and representation is likely a byproduct of her roots in the Mormon faith, and I can recognize and identify with some of the feelings Meyer and Bella are grappling with as someone who myself came up in the era of party culture in the evangelical church. There's the air of mystery and dating that everyone experiences. But when you add a religious seal to the proceedings, the longing, the zeal to the and holy and God or gentle love is the most exciting things imaginable for a teenager. Twilight is, at least for a select group of ladies, has been the most anticipated movie of 2008, and their wait is finally over. The question is, was it worth it? For them, yes. For the rest of us, not so much. Twilight opened with the introduction of our heroines Bella Swan, played by Kristen Stewart. She is in sunny Arizona with her mom and new stepfather, and as they prepare for a long road trip, she decided that she'd rather go up to Washington State to stay with her estranged father, Charlie. He lives in the small town of Forks, population 3,000, and is the local sheriff. She arrives in the middle of the school year, so although it should be hard to make friends and it's implied, she managed to connect with a group of kids who are far more welcoming than he is already to be welcome. They give her the scoop on who's who, and they soon panned out the Collins and add a assortment of very pale-skinned guys and Gail to make things wider. They are apparently foster brother sisters, yet they are couples. They have been taken is by the local Dr. Colin and his wife. One of the group is of course Edward. His story is that no girls is good enough for him. Of course Bella is immediately fixes on him, although the feeling is apparently very much not mutual. As a matter of fact, what she is assigned to be his lab partner, he seems to be repulsed by her. Edward leaves for a few days, and when he returns, his mood towards Bella has changed considerably. He is now polite and at least foreign interest. She mostly gets over being offended and tries to get to know him, although he still doesn't want to get close to her. Almost immediately, he saves her from being killed in a car accident in a scene that's been shown in the trailer. She is no dummy and doesn't miss the fact that he was across the parking lot, got over to her in a flash, and was able to keep a van from smashing into her to the point that he left a dent in the door with his hand. Anyway, we soon meet Dr. Cullen at the hospital, whose makeup job is so incredibly wide that he looks like the Caesar Romero version of the Joker. He is none too pleased about Edward. I guess I cannot call him aid, possibly exposing who he really is to save Bella's life. One thing leads to another, and the Borgonian romance is on its way with a side trip to a confrontation with the bad vampires who actually kill humans to feed. You see, the Collins only drink the blood of animals. The bad guys have been responsible for a number of gruesome murders in town recently. One of them decided to target Bela, and thus we get the final confrontation, which finally brings us some decent action. So, what's good? I thought that the stars and supporting cast actually did a really great job. Bella's fans were engaging, funny, and they played their roles very naturally. Billy Borg was low-key and very good as Bella's father. Kristen Stewart did a decent job, and I have to say that despite his severely scalped eyebrows and uber funky hair, that I like Rob Pattinson portrayal of Edward Cullen. I don't know how closely the way he played the character matched the version in the book, but I thought that this uncertainty and awkwardness, in light of how powerful he really was, made him quite charming. There were quite a few moments of unexpected humor in the film that I enjoyed. Nothing huge or slapsticky, but just little things that were enough to actually make me laugh out loud, which some comedies this year didn't manage to make me do. Really, the performance made this worthwhile for me. So, what was not so good? For a non fan, it was really a pretty bland film. It seems very slow moving at times, and let's face it, it's a pretty stock teen romance movie. There was not anything really special here outside of the fact that it had, vampires. Nothing really eye-catching as far as cinematography or interesting shots, and one thing that really struck me as bad were the visual effects. When the film had its first super speed effect where the bad vampire cornered one of the locals, it was so poorly done that I think I actually gasped out loud. I mean, there was this incredibly cheesy plot that I cannot really describe. Expect to say that anything you see on an average episode of Smallville is done for better. Imagine my shock at the end of the film when, in the credit, I saw Industrial Light and Magic listed among the visual effect companies. I can only guess that they were responsible for some other effect and not the one I just mentioned, which was terrible throughout the film. Towards the end, the teen romance cheese factor peaked the needle in the aftermath of the big battle in a scene between Edward and Bella. That was about the hardest scene in the movie to sit through, and pretty much from there until the end is was quite snappy and reminded me of a typical teen series on the CW. The audience full of Twilight fans seems to enjoy it a lot and gave it a thumbs up, so I guess it's achieved its goal. I am curious to see if it does well enough at the box office to generate a sequel, which I am thinking would actually be better than this film. So take all what for what it's worth. I leave the decision of whether to see it or not up to you. Oh, and just for the fans, Edward does spectacle in the films and Bella is clumsy. Speaking my truth, the first Twilight movie is genuinely good. I have gone so such as long as turbulent journey over the past few years as I have matured, that has led me to the point of finally being able to say that I unabashedly and ironically love Catherine Hardwicke's Twilight. I didn't want to admit this fact for so long, honestly, partially due to some internalized misogyny that I can now see and admit to regret. I hated the idea of falling into the stereotype of guys who love these movies. This is especially strange as when I was much younger, I think around 12, I read the entire book series. I was quite an advanced reader for my age. Before I had seen the films or had my concepts of Twilight place in the culture, and I loved them. And so it made me sad that a couple of years later, as I became interested by the online world of discourse, I developed an internalized misogyny-driven superiority complex, which meant that I had to look down on them. These books and films are subject to such an unbelievable amount of security for years during the mid-late 2000s. While they always had a dedicated cult of fandom, it's easy to forget just how much of a cultural punching bag they were for the media and public alike. It really feels like only in the last year or so society has reeled back much of its bitter and crowd hatred for Stephenie Meyer's books and the film series Catherine Hardwicke birthed from them. And the fact that it's two women at the creation point of the Twilight phenomenon is of course no coincidence. Make absolutely no mistake here, the basis of this hatred is misogyny and particularly rancid disdain of teenage girls. They hate the music we listen to, the clothes we wear, the celebrities we like, the books we read, and the movies we watch. The books are certainly not Sabbath or Brently written literature, but they were trying to be. Why do we not be an eye at the multitude of trashy, unsophisticated action or crime novels out there and just accepted them as entertaining fun? Yet suddenly when Stephenie Meyer, who has spoken about how as a stay-at-home mother she began writing these books simply as a release and to allow herself to be creative. Why do we all of a sudden require her to be the next Shakespeare or else her work is simply not valid? The sad answer to the question is that media that is created by women to cater to young girls and women is so often immediately undermined and not taken seriously. I find it deeply sad that the Twilight franchise represent only one way in which I saw internalized misogyny manifest in myself as an adolescent. However, the focus of this piece is not the book but rather Catherine Hardwicke adaptation. Let me be very clear that I think all of the sequel in the Twilight film franchise, while highly enjoyable and not without cultural value, are pretty bad with some fairly horrendous writing. I would consider myself as enjoying those films in a guilty pleasure way, so by absolute no means do I think the series as a whole is of high merit of artistic quality. However, people really forget that before it became a blockbuster franchise, before the young adult film franchise craze it inspired when The Hunger Game, The Maze Runner, and Divergent dominated the culture, and not to mention all of the many failed attempts at launching similar franchise, all are beautiful creatures. The mortal instrument its straw. And before people ever thought they could make a lot of money from adapting the series, Catherine Hardwicke came along. Catherine Hardwicke, from her personal vision for adopting the novel, made that what is the many ways essentially an indie movie born from a very low budget and armed with a unique style and genuine intent to make a good film. Catherine turned the book into something incredibly memorable. This was not made as a franchise starts or a cash cow. They had no idea how successful it would be. Catherine has spoken for how there were no big producers involved and no expectation from the studio. There was not even a test screening. She was simply freely creating an adaptation of a teen novel with no expectation or preconceived idea from any party involved. I think it's fair to consider the sequels as cash grabs produced to generate profit and pander to teenage girls based on the success of the first one. It is important to note on this point that even though she created the franchise and had originally expressed his intention to make her own sequel, the franchise was taken out of her hands and placed into that of three different male directors. What was the artist's creation of a female filmmaker was controlled into a high-profile blockbuster franchise now held by a group of men. So why is the film generally compelling? Well, I think it's important to first acknowledge that there's no getting around how concerning and uncomfortable much of the gender dynamics are. They were created by Meyer in her books, but there's no avoiding them in adapting the story for the screen. I will never defend it. However, I have been able to make peace with it now as something that, while I dislike, doesn't impact my enjoyment of the film. The other issue that arises from Mayer's original story is that the climax is seen by some as underwhelming or just a little rushed, which I understand. It's definitely the first two acts of the film that I find more memorable than the action-heavy final act. However, these comes with the story which cannot really be attributed to Hardwicke aside. Twilight is a masterclass in mood and atmosphere. It's extremely gothic, not just in how it features vampire, and there's a duochrome that seems to hang over the town of Fox. Everything is drenched in this palpable bleakness, and in many ways, it so perfectly personifies teenagers and the purgatory that is high school. The blue-green filter that the film is presented it is often joked about now, but it's such a striking visual choice. While the likes of the Hunger Games and main treasure films and frankly almost most of today's current blockbuster have such a straggly grey, unappealing look with not realistic flair, Twilight is so memorable in its vivid, aesthetically bold color palette. The blue and green hues which highlight the forest which seems to cage in the residents of the town only serves to further seep fork in airy ambience. The soundtrack is similarly moody with an electric mix of mid-2000s staple like Paramore, Linkin Park and Muse. It also has what is, in my opinion, one of the single greatest score parts ever composed in Bella's Lovely. It used a couple of times throughout the film in different bursts and is heart-hatching gorgeous. One of my only point of conflict with the film which may anger some is that I am still not the biggest fan of Kristen Stewart as Bella. Don't get me wrong, I think Kristen is a very gifted actress who went on to do stunning work in other projects. However, I really just think she was miscast. I rented the first Twilight book not too long ago, and something that stood out to me is that for whatever reason, Kristen's performance just portrays Bella as being not as intelligent or headstrong or wonderfully stubborn as she is in the novel. There's something off about it where her intense awkwardness leans more in the direction of frustrating than it does charming, and I wish she was a little less on one-dimensional. That being said, though, I think Twilight deserves so much credit for essentially launching the careers both and Robert Pattinson, who are now undoubtedly two of the greatest and most singular performers of their generation. Pattinson is so endlessly charismatic as Edward and pulls off the feat of still managing to seem incredibly cool and desirable despite the creepiness of some of his actions, and for obvious reasons related to their personal lives, they do have very believable chemistry. I always think it's cool when supernatural elements in films are able to be subdued and used in low-key, lived-in ways. Yes, Twilight is literally about vampires, but it's also oddly not. The way that the Cullen family are so lackably and three-dimensionally characterized makes their vampire nature less of matter of focus. Before they are vampires, they are a family. They are such a likable clan of side character who I have honestly always thought are at times more interesting than Edward himself. More importantly, the palpable connection between Bella and Edward is what dominates the film, with the incredibly over-dramatic angst of being 17, even if you happen to have been 17 for a few decades, feeling their countership. Their early interactions are so wonderfully awkward and charming. I have always found their relationship far cuter and more romantic than they are clumsily flirting and nervously stealing glances. Then when it turns into that I want to be with you forever, I would die for you melodrama. Sometimes I never see spoken about is that Twilight is also generally funny. The sequels are what I would consider to be ironically funny in a way where you are definitely laughing at them more than with them. But there is so much snappy banter and so many unironically and unintentionally hilarious lines in the first one, honestly said by Edward, that my sister and I quite all the time it's the fluorescence. However, even with all of my pants about the palpable atmosphere and mood, Robert Pattinson's wonderful performance, the great soundtrack, the perfect depiction of teen angst, the charming early romance between Bella and Edward, the likable side character of the Cullen family, the subdued use of supernatural elements, and how funny the movie is, I already don't even need to offer any of this is to prove anything because my final point is that all you have to do is to know that Twilight is a good movie to watch the baseball scene. That's it, watch the baseball scene right now and tell me the movie is not cool. You cannot. Checkmate. Twilight when Bella relocates to the drizzly town of Forth, she meets the Collins, a family of vampires who can control their desire to feed on humans. She falls in love with Edward Cullen, who sees in her the soulmate he has been searching for. However, so appealing in her scent, he must battle his desire to drink her blood, the heroine akin to the vampire's own personal heroine. About three things the Twilight producers were absolutely positive. First, Twilight was a vampire tale. Second, there was a part of it that thirsted for teenage blood. And third, adolescent girls were unconditionally and irrevocably in love with it. Indeed, American booksellers have hired the author of the saga, which runs through four novels, as the new J.K. Rowling's Stephenie Meyer's first installment, selling more than 5 million copies in the US alone and thereby helping to fill the void left by the departed boy who lived. The fact that the film version arrives stateside is what has become the pre-Christmas plot slot will only boost the comparisons. In contrast to the Wizardly franchise, however, the director here managed to improve on the film's peppery progenitor while a succession of helmets have struggled to condense Rowling ever expanding Thomas into a digestible screen serving. Catherine Hardwicke hits top gear from the outset, rattling through the daily exposition and never once allowing the painful deal prodding that floods Mayer's book to overflow into inspiredness. Mayer is a devout murmur, her tale a metaphor for carnal abstinence, allowing young girls to splash around in a pool of obsessive love without having to swim in the turbulent water of scary teenage. The author, who had final cut throughout Hardwicke's first cut a little too steamy, hence the interaction between Bella and Edward becomes even more intimate. Hardwicke employing close-ups and avoiding the exposed flesh captures by the wider lens. The director, of course, understands the teen audience consider 13 or large of Dogtown, and she conjures one of the most beautiful films of the year. Former portrait Robert Pattinson, Send It in Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix is strangely handsome, as are the rest of his vampire brethren. The backdrop, meanwhile, the lush forests of the Pacific Northwest is truly breathtaking. Hardwicke sending her stars hurtling up toppling trees and sinking into deep moss. The lead performance too is strong. Panic Room and into the wild star Kristen Stewart constantly excellent. She is the vehicle through which audiences are carried on their journey, and her keen intelligence prompts a mature performance. Bella is both vulnerable and strong, a three-time damsel in distress, requiring Edward's white-faced knight to save her, and yet gorgeous enough to surrender to danger and send an immortal bloodsucker into a frenzy of desire. Said bloodsucker, Pattinson struggle at times. It's a demanding first lead role, requiring him to project a perennial restrained desire. He settled down eventually, but not before he is treated as to a series of hard-paced bout. Despite the presence of vampires, Twilight is a romance, not a horror, and anyone hoping to sink their teeth into a juicy gore feast will be disappointed. There is action, of course, ignited by the arrival of a troop of wandering neckbiters who, needless to say, are impossibly good looking, that feed on the local and lust after Bella's blood, leading to a showdown in a Bamera Palette studio. Hardwicke sensibly introduced these roughs early, and yet while she does have action credential working on 3 games before shooting Dogtown, the sequences are occasionally predictable, the wire work sometimes obvious. She also struggled with the depiction of vampires in Trek Sunlight. Meyer saga was prompted by a dream in which she saw Bella and Edward lying in the forest. Sunlight, dim light on the vampire export flesh in tooth. Hardwicke would have liked to exorcise the scene, but it's too important to the author. She turned to Ilm, although despite their best efforts, Edward's spangled skin looks a little odd. I did it finally watched Twilight for the first time. During my teen years, there were two kinds of girls, those who were hearts and those who rolled their eyes at the first kind of girls. Deciding to read real books instead, I fell into the latter category. Of course, I could not help learning a little of what Twilight was about over the years. I know that the films were based on the book series by Stephenie Meyer, and the protagonist in them was a girl called Bella Swan, played by Kristen Stewart in the films, who looks so pale that it's a wonderful she is not a vampire herself. There's a Edward, an actual vampire who people apparently found attractive, and there was Jacob, a werewolf who people also found attractive. The people who found Edward attractive would argue with the people who were attracted to Jacob, so much so that they each became team of the male lead they liked best. That was all I know of Twilight. Recently, I have found myself reflecting on the time of the Twilight fandom. A lot of people and the media is particularly bashed Twilight at the time the films were being released. The series was everywhere and unspeakable, but while something like Harry Potter has a very large fandom that continues to grow as new generations discover it, Twilight was very specifically aimed at teenage girls, people like the main character Bella Swan, although there was also a collection of Twilight fans known as TV moms, older women who enjoyed the series. It seems for a while that nobody liked teenage girls, and the journal beliefs from non-fans was that this series of books and films were damaging their bomb teenage girl brains. Twilight has also fascinated me more recently because it felt like the first real film franchise aimed at teenage girls, and it was a fantasy series. You don't get a lot of chick flick fantasy, not mainstream anyway, and I was curious to see how this alternate world with inhuman creatures work with the romance genre, if they blend it well together at all. Say what you want about Twilight, but you have to admit that it cannot be entirely coincidences that so many YA fantasy book to film adaptations have been made since, all featuring key romances, The Hunger Games and Divergent being top examples. Well, today, as a 22 years old woman watching the Twilight series for the first time, I am hoping that by giving these films a chance, I will dream my younger self for all the harsh, silent judgment I put upon Dev Hearts based on the first film alone so far. Twilight really didn't deserve all of the backlash it receives from people who were not fans, most of whom probably dismissed it before watching or reading it. Believe me, there are many cringe-inducing and hilariously awkward moments which I still shade with great delight. It's just that those moments did take up the entire running time. For those who have not seen it, Twilight follows 17 years old Bella Swan, and she moves in with her dad Charlie. With her mom and stepfather moves away from the stake of the stepfather career, Bella is enrolled into a new school where she meets many fellow students, including Edward Cullen, portrayed by Robert Pattinson. At first, Edward is rude to Bella, but slowly they bond over time. However, Bella notices lots of strange things about Edward and learns that he is a vampire. The blossoming romance between the two becomes difficult with the trial that come with Bella being human and Edward being a vampire. Will their love survive it all? When I finished watching Twilight, my first feeling was surprise at how little Jacob, played by Taylor Lautner, is in this film. I thought he was supposed to be a major character, and I knew he definitely is in the next one. He is on the poster in a prominent way. However, we learn very little about him here apart from the fact he has a crush on Bella. He seems sweet, but at this point I don't understand why guards went crazy for him. I have mixed feeling about Edward and unfortunately a lot of those feelings are negative. I have to say he looks ridiculous, laughably so, with his very white skin, almost sharply black looking eyebrows and bright red lips that resembles a very poor attempt at a Joker cosplay. I don't know how guards and the media made him out to be a heartthrob. The sparkle effect on him when he is in daylight is particularly laughable. Admittedly, Robert Pattinson is decent looking and looks a lot better out of the Edward look. But even so, I am still surprised so many people went crazy for him over this film. Robert Pattinson and Edward Cullen, who either looks fed up with everyone or like he wants to vomit for the majority of the running time. Out of the two lead actors, I would say Pattinson is the superior on here. I believe the material he had to work with was worse than what Stewart had to deal with as Bella. Pattinson had some funny, clunky lines. See my quote of the film down that he managed to deliver as convincingly as he could. My issues are not with Pattinson but with Edward, who is a very problematic character. Apart from being into excited by the smell of Bella and being fascinated by the fact she is the only person whose mind he cannot read, the viewer is represented with no reason as to why he likes her or would be attracted to her from the beginning. His behavior towards her is confusing. When they first meet, he is incredibly rude and never apologizes for this. Then he leaves school for a few days without explanation, only to come back and suddenly be very lovely to Bella, asking her question about herself. Even before the date, Bella later finds out that Edward, who doesn't sleep, watches her sleep in her bed each night by climbing in through her bedroom window. After saving her life at school one day, he tells her that she needs to stay away from him, but then he proceeds to follow her still. This is romanticized as this habit is only revealed when he saves Bella from a group of rowdy men. All of this is a stalker behavior and it's uncomfortable. Edward also proves to be very controlling and possessive over Bella, saying worrying things throughout the film such as, "It's like you are my own personal brand of heroine. I still don't know if I can control myself." He is talking about being around Bella. "I hate you for making me want you so much. I wanted to kill you at first. I have never wanted a human sprite so much before." There's also that time he tried to gaslight Bella after having her life, which was horrible. He also seems to be drawn to Bella in some part because of her low self-esteem, which I will discuss further when I examine her. However, in a scene where the two are in a restaurant, Edward reveals he can mind read, which brings up the exchange. "I can read every mind in this room apart from yours. There's a money, cat, and then you. Nothing. That's very frustrating." "Is there something wrong with me?" Edward, "See, I tell you I can read minds and you think there's something wrong with you. Firstly, why does he want to be inside her head to begin with? That's invasive and creepy. Secondly, it doesn't actually tell us how his mind reading work? Does he hear everyone all the time, and does he choose when to listen? Thirdly, and worst of all, when Edward asks, "You think there's something wrong with you?" he says it is a smiling way that suggests he is in awe at how self conscious she is of herself. There's a difference between fighting it endearing when someone is shy and smiling to yourself when you recognize someone is weaker than you. And sadly, this feels closer to the latter. Also, why was everyone in the restaurant only thinking about and money? Surely, at least one person is there would be thinking about the food. The 100 years age gap is a bit concerning, but the film does its best not to make this creepy by having Edward live as a 17-year-old going to school and living a family life with his foster parents and siblings. This is fine, but surely as a man from early 20th century he would have some rather different social ideas than the ones people in the time of this film would have. I think that would be interesting to explore and see how those ideas evolve over time, if at all. The sad thing about Edward is that I feel like he actually had potential to be a wonderfully interesting, tortured anti-hero. Buffy the Vampire Slayer did it well with Angel. Here, when Edward does things like claim to be a repulsive monster only to become glittery in the sun and fixate over a very vulnerable younger, it's hard to feel anything resembling pity towards him. The best thing about this character was that Peterson and Stewart shared decent chemistry together and he acted the part well. Notice it's the actor and not the character I have praised for rough. I am just going to say I don't see myself becoming Team Edward or Team Jacob anytime soon. However, is there a Team Carcelis, because I will happily join the group. Yes, he is another odd looking pale vampire with wide contact lenses. But you know what? Carelessly played by Peter Facinelli is amazing. He is attractive, dedicated to the people he loves in a non-creepy way, and is remarkably compassionate. He saves several people's lives by turning them into vampires when they were dying, and he is a doctor dealing with the creatures he should most want to eat each day. But instead he helps them. I want to learn more about the relationship he has with his wife, who he turned into a vampire when she was dying, and more about carelessly in gender. Now I need to talk about Bella and Kristen Stewart. To begin with the latter, I really don't think Stewart's performance was as bad as everyone implied. She played an awkward character and she nailed the awkwardness. It's making a lot of that awkwardness endearing to the viewer, where she didn't quite hit the mark. Bella falls over constantly to the point everyone else comments on it to her, and Edward gets irritated by it at one point. I don't understand why this is necessary to her character unless she has an actual disability such as dyspraxia that is revealed later on. Still, I know dyspraxic people far more physically stable than Bella. When it comes to Bella being a monotone, quite painfully awkward teenage, I completely believe in this character. I pretty much was this character as a teen, in the sense at least. What I don't believe is everyone else's reaction to her. She moves to a new school at the beginning of the film, and literally everyone is fascinated by her. The girls all want to be friends with her, and the boys all ask her out. Bella seems to have nothing in common with the girls, who are bubbly and positive, and no dynamic is built between them. As for the boys, Bella acts awkward and she rejects them as her sights are set on Edward. Even everyone in Edward's family loves Bella and is happy she is dating Edward. This element is frustrating, as this could have been a great way to create conflict, particularly when there is not actually a lot of plot for the first two-thirds of the film. Additionally, Bella has alarmingly low self-esteem and seems reluctant to communicate with anyone except Edward, who is horrible at the beginning and toxic later on, and her mother who abandoned Bella with her dad for a reason that at this point is not entirely clear to me, or if it's for the reason I believe it's a weak. The main scene that highlights this is when Bella wakes up in hospital near the end of the film and Edward tries to break up with her to protect her from other vampires. Bella then proceeds to have a kind of panic attack, begging Edward not to leave her until he agrees they'll stay together. Once she informs this, she catches her breath and says something along the lines of, "You cannot say that to me, don't ever say that to me again." Now, if someone you love tries to break up with you, of course it's devastating and you don't want it to happen.